so we've got a bit of show car fun going on. So BOSSXC's been back to Queensland. It's all been sorted out mechanically. So they made a few changes to some of the things we did. Some of those things were they needed to go to a quieter muffler. So the muffler, we didn't know how it would go with the big block. They've gone to a slightly bigger, quieter one. Messed about with injection, all sorts of bits and pieces to make it right. It's been through the engineering process now, done the driving events that they need to do for that. So brake tests, slalom changes, all those sorts of things. And now we've got the job to get it all cleaned up, ready for MotorEx. So the reason we've got the engine crane out at the moment is we just want to lift the engine up to take the engine mounts out, because they made some slight modifications today. They moved the engine back 6 millimetres to get some extra clearances to pass that engineering process. And what we're doing now, and you can see all the parts on the tables here now, is pretty much pulling stuff off. In some cases to do actual mechanical work, like actually fix things, but in most cases just polishing. So we've got something like that, which is the hat off the rear brake, looking pretty untidy, and then Steve's been at it, giving that a polish. So we'll just hand polish all those bits, because they don't need to be sort of re-polished, they just need to be cleaned. You can see the chrome parts off the rear brakes. Now the reason all that's off is that the Diff itself actually had a breather, and it was directly on the housing, and it was breathing pretty much oil out of it and going over the left-hand brake. So we've just pulled that all apart. I'll get some footage of that in a minute, and we're going to get Phil back now and put an actual breather line on it and get it up so it only breathes and doesn't put oil everywhere. So all those little things we're going to work our way through, and as we're doing, so the wheels over here, you can see there just the brake dust and all from the braking test and the driving that's been done. So now we've got to go through, clean all those up, and then all the tyres have got a bit of pickup and that from the racetrack where it was tested. And yeah, we'll just do what we do, get it all detailed up, because we've got a couple of months out to get to MotorEx. Righto, that escalated fairly quickly. So this is the point I'm talking about up here. So that there was screwed in there as the breather. So what we're going to do now is come out of there with the fitting and go up here somewhere, and we'll put another breather up. So this one's for the carbon canister in the boot. So what we'll do now is we'll bring this one up here and put it up above the housing. So that'll take those, you know, it should breathe, but it shouldn't be leaking oil. So that oil's come down here, you can see here. So we just want to keep that away, because this is an internal brake here. So it come apart fairly quickly. And what we've done now is taken the opportunity to polish all of those parts up, because, so that's the handbrake. So all of these parts, this Diff, I think Peter's had it like 12 years, and it's been in and out of the car through the build process, and we've never pulled it apart. So this is the first time we've had the opportunity to polish it properly. So we're working through the process using our little Merca sanders and that to take the scratches and fitment marks basically, and now we're repolishing those. And we'll work through that and get it all reassembled. I'll get Phil over from Fuelworx to make up a line, and we can start polishing and putting it all back together. So they're the rear brake rotors, and then all the handbrake cables and stuff. So I'm going to just make sure everything's detailed 100% and make it look the best we can. You might have caught in the background the exhaust system. So when it went up back to Brisbane for engineering after the first summer nats, it was really a bit loud. Now we'd used the mufflers from Spintech, and these are a new one they've brought out now, their quietest muffler ever. So they've actually modified the exhaust system and put the bigger muffler on it. And at the same time, up at the front, we had a few issues with not enough airflow getting past the exhaust, and had a bit too much heat on the floor. So they've modified some of the fronts Now it had been recoated, but I've taken the option now to sand up all of those changes and repairs so that we can get it up as good as we can for its next outing at MotorEx. And this particular colour is a lot darker than what we had originally, and I like the colour we had previously, so we'll get that all redone. So this was the bronze we used from up at Competition Coatings in Sydney, so we'll go back to that on the exhaust, and then you can see up here where that heat's got there, and I think it was probably in that whole tuning process, and also at the track when they were actually working the car pretty hard without a lot of airflow. And what Paul's done now is made a bit more clearance. He's dropped that side of the extractor down and a little bit more clearance, and now with street use it shouldn't have any problems. So we've cleaned that up, that'll go back up and we'll get that recoated, and then that'll be another box ticked and we can move on to the next item. Okay, so the detail work continues. So part of the process to do this breather was obviously to start pulling it apart. So I've ended up taking both sides off. That enables me to get to all of the things up in here and stuff that I couldn't get to before, to be able to get in there and polish it properly. And I've repolished that strange centre. Left the brakes hooked up so I don't have to re-bleed, but I've had the different machines on those, given those a polish. And then at the moment I've masked these up so that I can get in and paint the universal joints, because they were sort of half black, half natural steel, which eventually are going to rust. So they were like this one over here. So I'm just going through trying to tidy up all those little loose ends. Things like this one here where you'll see this face in behind. I'll get some paint on that as well. And to be able to do that on the car, I've been using a range of different products, from the die grinder. This one's quite soft, some harder ones there, a bit of Autosol, a bit of Mothers. Been using 1200, 1800, 1500 on that one's spinning, so that's polish. Sorry, 12, that's the orbital. So that's with the sandpaper on the aluminium. Then I go to a foam pad, quite firm, on the polisher. And then this one here where I can get it in is very good. It's got quite a firm pad for polishing. So I've been working my way through that. And then the parts that we can pull off the car. So Steve's been here hand sanding, you know, with 1200, and then go to the machine with 2500, and then take it out the back on the wheel and polish it up. So using the wheel, you don't really need to go too fine, but some of the stuff you can't get on the wheel. And then things like these, I'm just making everything consistent, so it'll be black or silver or chrome or polished. And then out the back, I've got the rotors, so I mask those up. Just run a bit of fine line around where the pads run. And then I've cleaned those up with Prepsol and Scotch-Brite. And then I've a little bit of 400 on the areas that were raised, so they were in like a, almost looked like a zinc coating on them. And then I've just used a high temp aerosol to make them all silver, so they'll all match in with everything else. And then I'll do the fronts the same so that everything matches up. Another little job we've been playing with is, these are the standard centers for the wheel, and you can see there that's the bolt that was supplied, and it's got just a normal hex-headed bolt. And what we're doing is we're looking to put something like that in, which just comes down a bit flusher. And this is all part of me trying to make this car judge better. So if you stand back from 20-30 metres, might not look any different. When the judge looks at it, I don't want things to look like they come straight out of the box. So something like this, you think, yep, I'll just buy some of those in a button head, when we went to buy some of those from our bolt buy guy, they were a little bit long, so we got to trim them down, no big deal. But then the head won't fit into that hole. So we've just worked out a process now to be able to linish that down and then go through a couple of stages to polish it. So Steve's been doing these on the linisher, so I'll just get him to turn that on and show you what he's done there. Now by using the drill, what that does is it keeps it nice and round, so you're not going to end up with staggers in the face. So you're basically going from that to one a little bit smaller in diameter and a little bit nicer face on it. Now when you're using the linisher to do that, this belt's just about worn out, and we're deliberately using that so we don't groove it up too much because we've got to polish it. So the next stage to that is once it's been linished.
It's already one.
Well, this one's already linished, so once it's linished, it's sort of got the grooves in it. So what I do then is I'll take this belt off and put another one on. So this is a Scotch-Brite. It's quite a fine Scotch-Brite, but it's quite worn out as well. And I'm just going to clean that up. So everything we do with polishing is about making smaller scratches. So we're going from a sandpaper to a Scotch-Brite, and then we go down here and we go to a polishing wheel, and the first wheel is quite coarse, so it's a sewn wheel, it's quite hard, and that will now take those linishing marks out. And then the final process is a soft wheel, so it's a calico soft wheel, and we've got a couple of different versions of that, so I'll use the bigger one to once again minimise the scratches. So that's now quite shiny. And you'll probably get away with leaving it like it is. Now this is a good little trick if you're doing some polishing on your wheel. This is something Darren introduced me to a long time ago. It's just a bit of wire and a bit of cardboard, which we update every now and again, and it sits on there, and because it's spinning this way it doesn't come off, but it stops all the rubbish, all this coming up and hitting you in the face. So all of the stuff that goes up the wall, it hits on the back of that and makes life a lot easier for you, especially if you're going to spend all day out here doing it. So I did a fair bit on the weekend, and I'll show you some of those parts that I did on the weekend. So this is a softer wheel, but it's also a different compound, a softer compound. So what we'll do is work our way through and do, you know, all of the bolts through each stage, but I just thought for the process of the camera I'd just show you how that worked. And what you end up with is a nice shiny stainless steel bolt. Now what I've got that in is a bit of pipe, obviously come out of something, and it's got two different threads in it. This one's UNC, and that just enables us to hang on to things. So whether it's that one, or if you've got a bigger bolt that you're trying to polish, something like that, you can just screw it in the other end and hold on to it to be able to polish them, because you can hang on to them with your fingers, but you end up very sore in the hands. So that now will sit in there like that, rather than having the one that come with the wheels sitting up like that. Front rotors. I think earlier in the program you would have seen where I've done the rear rotors, and I had sort of planned to probably do these silver, but I've had a look at this on the car with the wheel on, and I think it would be too prominent. So I'm looking to keep this in the black, I think. And then the rotor, I've used this quite a lot. So this one's, it's called cast iron. When you paint something in this high temp paint, it looks like cast iron. So it looks like nothing's done to it, but it doesn't rust. I use that on my own cars. We used it on tailspin. I'm thinking that's what I'm going to use, because when this goes on, you see this area here, you see where the brake pad runs to there. So I'll mask that off and then paint this, I think, in this colour. I think the silver is going to be too bright. And then the bolts that go in here, once again, I think a bit heavy. And I'm looking to go to a button head, but I need to keep them in steel because the back of this bolt activates the ABS sensor. So if you have a look over here, this is the sensor for the ABS that we've had to adapt onto this car from the FG. It's a magnet and it utilises the bolt and the nut to actually pick up the sensor of the wheel turning. So if I change this bolt that normally goes there and goes past to a stainless steel, it won't actually, the magnet won't pick it up. So I've just got to find some high tensile bolts in steel rather than in stainless. And if I can find those, then I'll change those over to button head as well. This is the rear handbrake. So it's a manually operated handbrake, which is required. And we've repolished all that, and I think I showed that earlier. But what I've decided to do is put some black in there, and I think it looks sort of nice. And the reasoning behind that is just for points for detail. So if I just polished it, it's going to look good. But if I polish it and then put the black, more work, should be more points. So that's the sort of process that we continually work through to make everything a little bit better. And then the same as these, I polished these up on the weekend. So I've used that big polishing wheel out the back where I can, and then obviously cleaned all of these threads. So I've just used Prepsol, because we had oils and stuff on to actually put the springs on. So I've gone through now, cleaned everything up, polished all the insides, and now they look sort of better than brand new. So it's an ongoing process that you've just got to keep your head down and keep moving forward. Front brakes. So obviously the car's had some use, and we can see by all the brake dust and stuff. So I don't want this car to look full bling. So we've got the option, you know, I could strip the black off of this and polish it, but then it creates the issue that it's going to be long-term, something's got to be polished all the time. I've already spoken about the bolts on the other one, on the other side. The caliper itself, I'm going to leave as it is, but I'm actually going to polish the paint, the factory Brembo paint, and obviously get rid of the stickers. And you can see this spring clip here, which is the anti-rattle. I'm sure the ones on, these are the same as what's on my ute, and I'm pretty sure they're a plain stainless, but the heat obviously turns stainless that goldy colour. So I've polished that one up already. So I'll just pop these pins out, take the bolt out, pull the pads and all out, and then start cleaning. And if we go around the other side, so I've just got that hanging off there, so I don't want to have to bleed brakes and things. So I'm just going to clean that up now, get rid of all of the brake dust and stuff out of it. And then in the process of the engineering, when I went up to Paul, he's changed the hub and the setup, and some of the bolts were changed, so they needed to be polished. So when I get the other sides off, I'll show you how I go about doing that, because these are the bolts that now go through here with a spacer on the back to just move everything in, which is part of what they did, but the bolts were standard. So I've polished this side and I've polished that up obviously. So I'll grab the others and get Louise and just show you the process I used to do that on the linisher. So these Brembos are pretty cool. You can actually knock the 2 pins out and take this bolt out and remove the pads from the front, which I guess is a bit of a race car style. Or you can take the main bolts off. So I'm just going to knock these pins out, and I'm doing that because I want to polish it all. And they just have a little clip on the other side. Just hold that spring in. You can see there, that just comes out. So that holds the pads, stop them rattling, and then that little lock pin there just holds those in. So I'm just going to knock those out, undo this bolt, and then the pads will come out. So you can see that just has a bit of a thread lock on there. Out come the pads. Oh no. These are the bolts that I'm going to polish, and you might think you'll never see those. Well, when you've got mirrors and everything and people coming from different angles, I'm mainly worried about these faces and these spaces, because when you look from the front back up into the mirror, people will be looking for things. So I'll get the hub off because I want to paint those, and we'll get everything cleaned up, clean everything inside, and yeah, we can start putting it back together. Now some people might find this a little bit basic, but I'm trying to just cover the things I'm doing. So the bolt's got some numbers and stuff in it, and the faces aren't very nice as well. It's pretty typical of the way bolts are made nowadays. So I'm just going to hit it on the linisher, quite a fine grit, take all that off, and then I'll go to the Scotch-Brite and then we'll polish it. So one of the things to remember, if you're going to do these faces, you want to take very little product off, because otherwise your spanner won't fit. So this is a little bit coarser scotchy than I was using last time on the small bolts. I've got, you know, my grip marks there now. It's probably 120, something similar. You can see there, starting to shine, but it's still got the scratch marks in it. Looking pretty good now. I'll just get these other edges. top face on that edge. I'm just going to run that around and take a bit off of that. Not quite so sharp. That's not too bad. We go to the coarse wheel. Now you can get bigger wheels, they wear down. We don't do a massive amount of this anymore, so probably a little bit underdone on some of the wheels. So that's now sort of rounded it off and flattened it off, but it's not shiny because that's on the softer wheel. Nice and shiny. Now I forgot, when I did the other side, I realised that this little bit here, you can actually see when it comes through the bracket. Probably more important than the head. So I'm just going to take a bit of that off. Now I'll go through the two stages with that, and the reason for that is when those bolts come through this bracket, which you can see on the inside, it'll end up looking like that rather than having the dirty sort of end from the factory. Phil's been back and made a nice little line up here. So we've come out of where the original breather was here, so we've now run the line up and put that breather up the top here, just with a nice little clamp. So now, if you imagine that you've got your gear running around in there and making the pressure, here it was probably slopping up on it. So now the oil, if it's going to get out, it's got to come up through the line and get out through the breather. So we're pretty sure that'll fix that problem. That now enables me to start putting everything back together. So we've polished all these, you know, painted the bolts and things. This face here I haven't painted because the rotor bolts onto that, and you really shouldn't be painting that. The bits that go on there now is this one here. So I've bolted that back together and I've painted, you know, the rotor with some high temp paint. So that can now go back on, and I'll put all of that rear end back together, and that'll just finish off the detailing and fine tuning of that. And now I can start working back towards the front. So I'm trying to get all this mechanical stuff done so that I've got some paint repairs to do. Now, with like any car, I've got an area here where the wheel had actually touched on here, and it was to do with the wheel alignment. And when it's gone back up to Paul, he's actually changed the hub, which has moved the wheel in a little bit, but he's also been able to get his toe in, toe out, all that sort of stuff sorted, acclimate centers. So it won't touch here again, but I now need to repair that. So I've just sanded it up, put some epoxy on there, left it a couple of days. I'll sand that up now, and I've got to put the stone guard back on, so that'll be a little bit tricky. And then up underneath here, we had a bit of a drama with the exhaust, and I think it was probably the fact that it was in the workshop being tuned. They have actually modified the exhaust to give us a little bit more clearance there to make sure it doesn't happen again. So once again, I'll clean that up now and start working towards getting all of those things touched up in the next week or so. While that's all going on, I've been, Steve's unpacked the stand, so the stand came back down with the car. Those people that have watched this process would know that we built a stand for MotorEx last year. It was almost a last minute thing. So we've just got that out, it's all powder coated, we're just polishing it all back up. And the reason that we're going to that extent is with Superstars, of the points in the point system, out of 1100 points, there's 100 points that are allocated to the stand. So it's called impact and display, and it's all about putting on a decent show, and to reward people for doing that, you get more points towards Grandmaster or Super 6 or whatever you're trying to aim for. So we built that. I was very happy with it. We ended up with a bronze medal from it, but I just felt that it was probably a little bit underdone in a few areas. So these are the corner boxes where the light stands go. So I've just been working with the owner, Peter, and his brother-in-law up in Queensland to make up some little panels to go on here. So they'll be this big, but it's then a case of trying to work out, you know, whether you go black or whether you go gold or whether you go white. So because he's got the machine, he's made me up a few, and of course I've then sort of gone, well, the black's cool, but I wonder if we put some blue in it. So I've just done that with a brush. Once I make a decision, talk to Peter about it, we're just going to make those up to go about that size on there, and then we'll have those on the front facing and the rear facing boxes. We'll just add a little bit of extra to the stand. And then the other thing, we're looking at carpet, whether we change the colour to give the car a bit more pop, because it was quite dark and I felt the car got a little bit lost. And at the same time, polishing all of the components, which is a lot of them. And then I dropped a couple off to Adam Perry from Perry's Garage that had the stand made through his work, to actually re-powder coat some, because some of them got scratched, to make sure it's all 100%. So it's another part of that detail process at a car of this level that's in Superstars, to make sure you've got all the boxes ticked, and when you turn up there, you're doing the best thing you can do with what you've got.